Talk in your old man voice.
Yeah. Put your preservation pants on.
Those are called Depends. Welcome to the Archispeak podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. Each episode, Neil Pan, Cormac Phelan, and I have a casual conversation about all things architecture, and we invite you to listen in as we talk about everything in the profession, both the good and the bad. Maybe you're considering a career in architecture, you're still in school, or you've been around the blocks of Corbusier's City of Tomorrow more times than you'd like to admit. Join us in the studio as we stand around the water cooler and talk about why we love our chosen profession. It's time for some Archispeak.
I died in South Africa, only outlined my body in Tiffany blue. When I died, I drove right and swam with the dolphins and Lisa Frank. And you.
Welcome to episode 44 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
And this week, we're going to start off with a few follow-up items. And our first follow-up is we want to mention that the Equity by Design Symposium coming up on October 18th is actually sold out. So congratulations to them. And Archispeak is a sponsor of that event, and we will be there, or at least one of us will be there. So if you're
all
there...
be there in spirit.
Yes. So if you are going to be there, I will actually be there, and I'll be doing some interviews, and we'll be doing an episode after the symposium to talk about it and what happened, and we'll share those interviews, and I think we'll actually have a guest on from the Equity by Design Symposium team. So we're looking forward to being a part of that, and that's, again, coming up on October 18th.
Where's that?
That is in San Francisco.
San Francisco.
That's right. Yes, that's
Fancy
why.
town.
That's why I will be there, because it's a
Home of
little
Neil's
short BART
new-
ride for me.
Home of Neil's new football team.
Shut up. Just shut the hell up. Right there. Oh, I see. Is that how this night's going to go? Okay.
Sniping. He's just sniping.
How did that baseball team of yours do today?
Got a heckler in the front row.
All right. Okay,
Moving on.
So moving on. Another follow-up item is we really appreciate people that call into the show. And we've had a few lately and over the summer, and we kind of wanted to follow up on a few of these calls and discuss some of what was said and, kind of give a little bit of feedback. So we had an anonymous caller this summer from Queens, New York, discussing some comments about episode 39, which was our Seriously Millennials episode.
Hey guys, I'm listening to the Millennials episode, and there's too much to type, and I happen to be walking the dog at the moment, so there was no way really to type it. But I think the thing that's being missed here is he's kind of making, the original author, Nathaniel there, is kind of making two separate arguments. He didn't frame, it's not woven together very well, so I understand why this became one piece, but what he's really talking about is what kind of work architects are doing and how this next generation of architects may not want to do it. And on that front, I can sympathize. I came into the industry as a lighting designer who wanted to work on sustainability projects, and lo and behold, I found that the work that paid bills often did not care about sustainability. And I think that's what he's railing against more than the idea of hard work, or more than the idea that your boss is supposed to be fulfilling you and you can't find your own fulfillment. I felt his frustration when I first got into the business. I saw a lot of work that I didn't want to be doing. And so on that score, I sympathized. The tone is what I think you guys were reacting to more than maybe the content, because, in several different ways, he sort of inoculates himself against the it's not that I don't want to work hard argument. Those things weren't quoted when you guys were talking about it. So I think you were reacting more to his tone than to the content.
So I don't know if you guys want to make some comments about that, or...
Well, I would give him that. I mean, it's hard not to react to the tone, and I think most of the comments I think you were saying this the other night, Cormac, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I think everybody reacted that way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody had the more visceral reaction of, how dare he? And even, people that were self-described millennials themselves in the comments, were saying, oh, he's full of it. And, the author of the article. And
Nathaniel Eck, I believe.
Yes. And I can agree that, most millennials that I've met are willing to put in the work. I mean, when I say met, that work at our firm, and they're willing to put in the work. They're willing to, what I felt was what Nathaniel was slighting was they're willing to put in the pay their dues. And I think my reaction is that he didn't. And it wasn't the tone. It was just he was saying that, we're not going to pay the dues. We're not going to do the toilet room plans. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We want to just jump right in and do, the stellar work and stuff. And, I'm somewhat kind of watering it down. But, that was my thoughts is that, I think he was just speaking from, whatever experience he was coming from. And maybe he saw, kind of a little more old school that, says, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. But, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I kind of think, I feel like there's some days I feel like him too. And then I feel like I'm on the cusp of between the two generations for sure.
Yeah.
And so, when I read it, there's half of my brain, my reaction is, yeah, this is, I have this passion as well, and then the other half of it, I see both sides of it. But so I think the tone was off-putting, and I do think we were definitely reacting to that, especially you, Neil. But I think that
go back and listen to that rant. That was pretty good.
That was a good rant.
Yeah.
Like you said, Cormac, I work with millennials too, and I think you're right. People do, work really hard. And at the same time, it's like, why do we... The beauty of millennials is, why do we do it this way? Right? Because I think a lot of times we are just stuck in doing things the way we've always done them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And like my kids, their favorite question is why? And I think it's a really valuable thing to revisit all the time. Yeah, why do we do it this way? There's new ways to do this.
Oh, absolutely. And look, if the millennials and Nathaniel and anyone else has a better way of doing it or a more efficient way that doesn't sacrifice, quality of design, quality of documentation, life safety, all of the things that we have to worry about. If they can come up with a better, more efficient way, you would be, you shouldn't be in the profession if you're not willing to move forward. Hey.
Well, I think that there's jobs for many different types of people in architecture, but I think you're talking about people like us, I guess. I don't know how to say that. But.
Well, I'm just saying that, we've got, I'm hoping, a few more decades of time in the profession, and we're going to have to change. We're going to have to keep up with the times, and I think definitely, Evan, you're more than willing to keep up with modern technology and everything else, and that funny talky phony thing and everything else. But unlike Neil, who still uses a mimeograph machine.
I think Neil dropped off the call.
I'm still here. I'm just keep talking there.
I'm crafting my telegraph to you right now. But
chiseling it into the stone.
I'll send you a fax.
This damn carbon
Where
paper.
were you?
I don't know anymore.
All right.
But
I think we kind of talked that one out, though. I mean, go back and listen to episode 39 for our comments to it. And we do appreciate the call and the follow-up, from our listener in Queens. So, if you think he was out walking the dog. I think he got cut off at the end. Yeah, maybe.
So maybe that's
so.
why we don't know who it was. But yeah, they didn't mention their name at the beginning. So if the caller's listening and they did mention their name, sorry, it did get cut off at the end. I think we have like a 3-minute limit on the voicemail.
So
Yes.
so
And
go to the comments of this show and let us know who you were,
Yes, absolutely.
because we do appreciate the comments.
For sure.
Yep. Speaking of 3-minute limits, our next caller who left had to leave 2 messages because he rambled on a little bit. He didn't ramble on, actually.
We ran out of tape.
He
right?
ran out of tape.
was-
That's right.
yeah.
So Jeff Eccles ran
Ran
out of
mini tapes.
Yes, he ran out of tape, and so he left us a couple of messages. But he was calling in and referring to episode 42, where we talked about architects' websites.
He doesn't know anything about that.
No, he's totally clueless. But
Architect of the Internet, Jeff Eccles.
no, Jeff's a great guy.
That's his website, architectoftheinternet.com.
That's right. And we'll have links in the show notes for that. So have you signed up for your show notes? Go to the website, archispeakpodcast.com, and on the right-hand side of practically every page, you can sign up for those show notes and have them delivered to you as the podcast goes live.
So you can follow along.
And yes, you can follow along so you won't forget. So anyway, Jeff had some good comments about episode 42 and talking about pricing, and his comment about giving it away is, and providing helpful information, how it helps establish you as an expert. And he also made some comments about qualifying your leads, and then also too about websites and not necessarily making them a portfolio. And I think that's what some of his other comments was kind of backing that up. Is like, don't just make it a portfolio, but provide that helpful information, give away information, and you'll find that your clients will appreciate that, and they'll see that you're the expert here, and they're going to want to hire you and use that website as that device.
Hello?
Hey guys, it's Jeff Eccles from Architect of the Internet. I just finished listening to your episode number 42, Architects' Websites, and I have to tell you, I ranged in emotions from laughing out loud at one point to nearly spitting out my coffee. Obviously, the topic is close to my heart and what I write about on my site. And yes, I think at some point, if you had done this live in studio with Enoch and Mark LePage, you probably would have been beaten about the head and shoulders by those guys at one point. But I wanted to throw out a couple things to think about, or a couple of examples from outside our industry. One being Ryan Hanley from Content Warfare podcast. He's an insurance guy, and at one point he spent 100 days shooting 100 short videos all about the insurance industry, why you need this insurance, what this insurance is, all kinds of examples that are helpful to people who are shopping for insurance. That goes to the comment, I think, of make your website helpful in the content that's on your website. The other thing I wanted to speak to was the idea of posting your pricing on your website, for better or for worse. I'm sure you've probably heard of Sales Lion, Marcus Sheridan. He started out as a swimming pool guy, right? He wrote a book. It's like Swimming Pool 101 or something like that. But anyway, he advocates for posting your pricing. Obviously, he's in a different industry. They're selling swimming pools. They're not providing professional services. But he uses his book and his pricing as a way to qualify leads, which is one thing you guys were alluding to in your discussion. But it's an incredibly, almost mind-blowing example of the way Marcus does things for his swimming pool company, River Pools and Spas in Virginia. But if you haven't read his Swimming Pools 101, salesperson doesn't come to the appointment. They postpone it. They ask you some questions to figure out whether or not you've read it. Like I said, if you haven't read it, you don't get the appointment with the salesperson. So it's a way that they've really been able to focus their marketing and sales activities, like you guys were talking about. We at 110 Studio here we can spend multiple hours and exponentially manpower hours interviewing potential clients who. Hey guys, Jeff Eccles from Architect of the Internet again. Sorry, looks like I've had too much coffee already this morning, and I ran your tape out. Anyway, to sum up what I was saying, be helpful on your website. Give helpful information. Like you said, you used the chef analogy. I wrote a post not long ago about giving it all away on social media, and that's exactly right. We have experience and expertise that even though we give the ingredients, our experience and expertise cannot be repeated or used by people that don't have the same. So don't be afraid to give away helpful information. It only establishes you as an expert and establishes your value. And then to the Marcus Sheridan example, qualify your leads as best you can before you spend any time meeting with them, whether that's putting pricing on your website or writing a Architecture 101 ebook or like Merica's posts, which are fantastic. I'm glad you guys used that example. Those are great ways that we can make our websites better. And do not design them as a portfolio. Do not make your websites for we enjoy looking at them, but we're not going to hire you. Make sure you're making your website for the people that you want to become your clients. I think you guys are spot on all the way through the episode. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. Really appreciate what you're doing there. Thanks.
My wife's kind of going through the same thing with her cleaning business. She removed her phone number from the website and from her Yelp page because she's spending way too much time on the phone trying to qualify clients, right? And so what she has now is online forums, and I think that's kind of what this guy's done here, is where you get all the information you need from him, exactly how he wants to get it out, and then once you've digested all that, then he'll talk to you. And I thought, this is a pretty smart way to get rid of the people who are just out there kind of, trying to, you've talked about this before, Neil, where people are just trying to get a number out of you real quick so that they can go to somebody else and shop it around. So.
That's, it's a problem I've been going through the last several weeks, actually, where people have been contacting me through my website, which is fantastic. And I appreciate everybody doing that. But, you go out, you meet with them. And even if you can only spend an hour, you're going to spend time coordinating, just setting up the meeting. You spend an hour or more talking to them. You come back to the office, you spend, maybe another hour. And I know some other people that we know online, spend a lot more time, depending on their types of projects, preparing a proposal. And in my case, doing some smaller remodels and additions, there's not a lot to do in preparing that proposal. There's some work, but, so you spend a little bit of time and you send it out and you follow up with them. And then they're like, yeah, no, I actually found, and this actually happened to me just last week. This guy came back. He's like, no, well, I appreciate your proposal, but I found somebody to do it for half that price.
Yeah, and I think, even with the 100 tips kind of a thing, what the guy's doing is establishing value, right? And this is what we talked about in the Architects Websites episode. I mentioned Merica McKeel's website. There's Build LLC's website, which is an awesome resource for architects and for people who are interested in kind of the nuts and bolts of architecture as well. You give this information away because all of these things, without context of a site and specific codes and all the things that actually go into getting a project built, you can't do a project without that stuff. So you're not going to lose out on any business by giving away these really great tips and ideas and things like that, because what you're doing is establishing yourself as the expert that you actually are, right? And they get to kind of get a feel for your voice and your insight and your aesthetic and however you want to position yourself. But then if people feel like they might be a good fit with you, then they're going to call you and they're not going to balk at the price as much because they know what you're providing has value. You've already given them value. Yeah. They're willing to take it to the next level at that point.
Yeah, it's all good points and things. I should take some of that advice as well, and improve things on my own website to try and give people an idea. One thing I've started to try and do is for some of these additions, remodels, they're pretty small, and I kind of have an idea of roughly what I'm going to charge, and so I'll give them a range when I'm first meeting with them, just to kind of gauge their reaction. Or are they freaking out? Oh my God! Or at least give them an opportunity so that when they get the proposal, they're not completely blown out of the water. Oh my God! You're going to charge us how much? And somebody else. And so anyway, Jeff had some great comments. We appreciate those. And I think there's a lot more we can all do with our websites. And actually, Cormac, you wanted to make a comment because that's the episode. I think we talked a little bit about pricing.
Yes. That's when Cormac had a little bit of I'm going to blame it on lack of sleep, because unlike the, two West Coasters there, who are doing this typically around 9 o'clock, if you extrapolate it to the East Coast, that's midnight and beyond.
Just man up, man. No excuses. Come on.
I have to give some excuse.
Be Army strong, okay?
I was wrong. I erroneously said that AIA has standardized pricing, and it was wrong. You know what? And here's the funny thing: I know that that's not the case, and for some reason, I still said it. So
yeah, as we do.
I
think that happens a lot on this podcast, actually.
Yeah, so for all of you guys who are just like, that's wrong, you're wrong.
We've issued a retraction.
You are absolutely right, I was.
Boom, that was easy.
I have another follow-up here. A couple episodes ago, we put out the call for iTunes reviews. And specifically, I called out the Entrepreneur Architect podcast. And we were tied up, right? Or did we have one more? Something like that?
We had one more.
Well, we did, but then when Mark did his episode, he said we were tied.
Okay, so since then, he now has 50 reviews, and we now have, I'm pulling it up right now, we still have 47.
Oh, this is horrible.
So clearly all three of our listeners have gone over to the Entrepreneur Architect podcast and left their reviews over there. They mistakenly went to the wrong podcast.
All right, if you guys can hold on a minute, I'm going to delete that from my listening. I no longer subscribe to Entrepreneur Architect. Take that, Mark. Live without me.
Yeah, he needs you.
All that money you were offering.
How did that work? I don't. It was that just reversed on us. I don't see what happened there. But
I don't know. But we need the Archispeak Nation to show up strong here and help us out.
You tried to pull that parent psychology and said, "No, don't do it."
Right,
and then they did
Don't push the red button.
Exactly.
Gosh. Is that the green pill or the red pill? I forget.
Yeah, it's the blue pill.
The blue pill. Sorry. Oh, it's been a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, that was like 99.
Yeah, it was. All right. Well, and now since we've thrown Mark under the bus, Evan,
to win, he must lose.
That's right. That's right. Okay. The total Highlander. It's the Highlander podcast here. So we had a great comment actually on the website.
We had a great comment from Dustin Alschul, who is a student right now. And let's see, we were talking about value engineering at the time, and we were talking about how a lot of that type of painful process does not happen in Design Studio when in school. And so he has a rather lengthy comment on the end of episode 43. So if you go to archispeakpodcast.com/episodes/43, you can read Dustin's comment. But he has a really great take on what he did to kind of take his future into his own hands, where he spent some time in an undergrad architecture program and he was only able to stand the so-called fluff for a year, and then he felt like he needed to go get a more I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I'll just say a more realistic experience of the architectural profession. So he transferred into a BS of Architectural Engineering Technology, and it sounds like it has been it's been really effective for him, and he's gotten some of the experiences that we have been kind of bemoaning here on the podcast regarding value engineering. And sounds like they're working directly with CM students, engineering students. They're working in design. They're kind of doing all of these different disciplines together. And it sounds like a pretty cool thing. It's happening at, where is it?
Lawrence Tech.
Lawrence Tech in Detroit.
It's in the suburbs of Detroit. And, I've talked with Dustin before, and, you know, him being a Michigander and, you know, pulling up my Michigander roots. And we've talked, and he gets actively involved.
Is there an accent that goes along with that?
Yes, it's called the English language. Most people don't know. Sorry, I had that conversation with some Marylanders today because they were picking on me and another guy, and we have absolutely no accent. But unlike my wife, who has one, I won't do that. Anyway,
let's keep her out of that.
And he gets really actively involved with a lot of different, both like urban issues in the Detroit area, and design, design issues. I think like the TED Talks, TED Detroit, and stuff like that. And so I gotta give him a shout out that he's doing something that most people in school either usually don't have time for or whatever, but he is taking his he's taking his future in his own hands and making exactly what he wants out of his education, and he's forcing his education to do what he wants.
Yeah.
And it's great, and I think more people, I think a lot of kids do that in school, but then they kind of lose their steam once they start getting into the profession. And I think that, just by the few interactions that I've had with him and stuff, I don't think this kid's going to be losing any steam anytime soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's awesome, and we
read
really
his
appreciate the comment. Yeah, go check out that comment. There'll be a link in the podcast to that episode where you can see his comment.
There were a lot of good comments on that episode, too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know Steve Hall had a huge thing about browsers and standards and multiple websites and hiring a professional to do it. So some good insight, lots of good insight on there.
Yep.
So check it out. Check out the comments on these on the episode entries on the website at archispeakpodcast.com/episodes, and then when you go into each episode, you can see the comments.
And we'll also have a link to Jeff Eckel's site, Architect of the Internet.
Yeah, tons of good info on there about social media, blogging, all that stuff that takes time to do, but everybody wonders how to do it. So,
Yes.
Go
stuff.
find out.
Didn't you start a website, Cormac?
I
Yeah,
did.
you did.
Might as well mention it so that you get some hits on it, and maybe that'll entice you to keep writing.
Crap. So I got to put that now in the show notes?
Yes, you do. Well, finally, and I even got a shout out from Bob. Like, his was, it's about
Got
time.
a shout out from Bob? Wow.
He just basically told me it was about time.
It's true.
And it is. I finally got CormacPhalen.com up and running.
How much did that cost you? Jeez.
It did.
Bet somebody owned that one, and they charged you, what, a couple grand for that domain?
I had to track him down and fight him for it.
Yeah. Street Fighter.
Exactly.
I like the logo. That's cool.
It's obviously a work in progress. I hope to one day, be to the, at least 50% quality of what Evan's site's going on.
Oh,
and if you haven't checked out Evan Troxell's website, you must.
Man. Thanks, man.
He's got some real... Hey, seriously, go... I'm telling everybody to go look at his photographs and stuff. He's got some good stuff up there.
It's not just architecture.
It's definitely not just
There's
architecture.
more to life than architecture. Hate to say it, listeners.
And right now it's starting off basically as a WordPress. It's kind of a basic WordPress one, and I've tried to customize it as much as possible. But it'll evolve. It'll become more later on. But I needed to give myself that push to get it right.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so one of the things that you did it for, though, was for the Architalks thing, right?
Exactly.
You should probably mention what that is so that people know. I'm sure that not everybody knows what Architalks is.
Well, haven't we all been involved with at least I know that you have and I have.
Neil did the first one, and did you do the second one, Neil?
What are you guys talking about?
Architalks.
The Architalks.
Oh, I did. Oh, yeah. Duh. Jeez.
Why don't you join the show?
Okay. Yeah. Actually, I did the first one. I missed the second one, and I got the invite for the next one, and I got to review that. That's coming up.
The next one, I've already actually started writing, and I'm quite excited about it because it's really good. I just love the topic.
And this is not an exclusive club at all. Anybody who wanted to get in on the Architalks kind of it's just a way for us to talk more about the profession, and it's real loose. It's very loose on purpose so that we get a huge variety in the topic. And Bob Borson over at Life of an Architect is putting this together. He kind of heads it up, and once a month we post Everybody's Talking with this has the same title, and then they kind of interpret it their own way.
Right.
So if you want to get involved in that, let us know, and we'll add your name to the list.
Yeah.
And so Cormac has it on his site, and I've got it on my site, and Neil has it on his. There's been 2 so far, and if you do the search for the hashtag Architalks on Twitter, you can see all of the people's who are involved. You can see all of their articles, and they're short to medium length articles, and sometimes they have images and sometimes not. And the last one was called "It's Exciting," and so you kind of get to interpret what that means to you. And so I wrote about how project actually starting construction is probably the most exciting thing for me. So Architalks, check it out on Twitter and check it out on our sites.
Perfect. All right, so that leads to another follow-up that we're going to probably spend the rest of the episode on. And this one was sent to us voicemail through Rusty Long.
Hello?
Gentlemen, hello. This is Rusty Long, architect and podcast listener. Love what you guys do with the show. Thought I would bring up a subject that is of importance to me personally and hopefully some of you guys. An interesting project going on in Raleigh, North Carolina that's gotten a lot of press, both positive and negative. A contemporary house that's under construction in the historic Oakwood district, designed by architect Louis Cherry. Recently got a lot of press in the New York Times. Everyone from Ariel Allison area to North Carolina's Preservation North Carolina head, Mira Coward, has weighed in on this structure. It's a contemporary house in a historic district. It doesn't really mesh with the existing style, but does meet the guidelines set forth in the district. And I thought it would be interesting to hear what you guys have to say, particularly Neil, because I know he is also on a planning board. Myself, I'm the chairman of my city's historic preservation board. It's just an interesting house and an interesting sort of battle over this house that's not really that contemporary, but also it's not a one-off copy of an 18th century structure like many of the others that have been attempted in that same district. So would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. Again, my name's Rusty Long. Look forward to hearing from you guys.
I mean, basically, for those of you that don't know, this is a house that Louis Cherry and his wife were building. Marsha Gordon is her name, and it's outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, in this historic district of Oakwood. And basically, they went through the entire process. They went through a lengthy review process. they through the Historic Preservation Commission, I think he mentions several articles about a 4-hour meeting, and they made some changes and basically, got their approval, got their building permit, and started construction. This all started, I think, around this time last year, about October last year. And so around February, I believe it was, a person who was against the project, actually at the Historic Preservation Commission, ended up suing Mr. Cherry and basically got the house stopped construction. Now, one of the articles here that we'll be linking to does mention that Mr. Cherry was able to sue to have the house at least completed so that it wasn't open to the weather and exposed to the weather. So there was a little legal back and forth that allowed him to at least button up the house. But it is not complete. Basically, the permit got pulled, and it's been going back and forth through the legal process right now, at least over the summer.
And it was just kind of sitting in limbo for a while.
It was sitting in limbo, yeah. But it raised a lot of questions about about historic districts, about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And I think that's kind of where we could probably talk about this, a little bit tonight. So
even beyond that, then it does become about aesthetics and opinions and people legally threatening. It turned into a giant mess. But if they got a permit, they went through the appropriate processes, and then they were stopped.
Well, that was the
Board of Adjustment.
The Board of Adjustment was invoked here and they were told at the time, this was back in February, that essentially the Board of Adjustment reviews the process that the Historic Development Commission goes through to make sure that all the rules and procedures were properly followed. They don't necessarily
to issue the initial permit, right?
To give the initial approval, right, so that they could obtain a building permit, which they did. Mm-hmm. So this Board of Adjustment essentially just reviews the rules and procedures, and they don't necessarily weigh in on the decision by the Historic Development Commission. And so they were told at the time, when it first started, that this should be no issues because everything was followed. Well, it turned out they through some lobbying or whatever, that was overturned. And so they said they didn't follow these rules and procedures.
Well, they said that the Board of Adjustment voted 3-2 that there had been, and this is in quotes, no rational basis for the Historic Development Commission approving the house.
Right. And they revoked his building permit.
Yep. It was illegal to continue building from that point forward.
Right.
Yeah, I read I'm reading another article that I'll send off as part of the show notes. Is they used incorrect standard of review and substituted their own judgment for approving his building permit.
Oh, well, okay.
There are people on these boards, right?
There are. Let me interject here. I was on the Historic Preservation Commission in my local town here, and I'm now a planning commissioner in the same town. And that's part of why you are on these commissions. I mean, it is for you to certainly follow any rules or standards, I should say,
but
guidelines.
Also know when you can break them, right?
Well, not necessarily break them, but the whole idea is that, at least in my town, here in Livermore, California, we have, I wouldn't say standards, but we have guidelines that, give us direction on how to approach whether something is historical or not. And then there's always the government has their standards for these their rules as well. And so, we really fall back to those and we refer to those. But, part of the reason you are on this board, part of the reason there are, typically 5, sometimes 7 people on this is so that you can interject your own personal beliefs and your personal interpretations of these things, because nothing is written in stone where it says you can build X, but you can't build Y. They're not written that way. They're written more as guidelines and for us to make interpretations. And that's why you interview for these positions. Hopefully you have some background in the board or commission that you're going to be appointed to, and so that you can interject those personal experiences to your decision-making process. So to find that these people did that and that was wrong, I just find that completely unbelievable that they could make such a decision.
Yeah. Crazy.
Well, and
overturn the approval, basically. Right.
Well, I just went through, basically the same process with the Annapolis Elementary School design, and it's in historic Annapolis, and their city of Annapolis has, and I'm actually looking at it right now on the old interwebs, building in the 4th century. Basically, it's design guidelines for building within the historic district of Annapolis. It's a 90-page document, and it basically goes through all of the different things that you could do, both in additions, renovations, modernizations of historic properties, and everything else. And so basically, when they're going through, there really isn't any area of interpretation, because they've, through a pretty lengthy process, developed this manual. Plus, it's also used in conjunction with the Department of Interior's historic preservation guidelines, standards and guidelines. Yeah, that was what I was referring to, but I couldn't remember the name. And they use all of the there's so many different and I'm blanking on exactly what they're called, but basically the Department of Interior has all bulletins, is what they're called, all these different bulletins of how you would do a renovation or a replacement of a standing seam metal roof in a historic district, and they'll go and explain it. So there's really no gray area, and so, and if you're doing a new building, 9 times out of 10, even in historic Annapolis, they're going to tell you they want the building to be of the time, not I want you to go and mimic something from 200 years ago. We want the building of the time. And,
if you want that, go buy that, but don't build it. I mean, it's a terrible thing, I think, to build a fake historical.
Well, in again, like if, reading just the Annapolis Historic District Design Manual, I mean, they'll explain that they don't want you to try to mimic something, because that was a period that we don't live in anymore. Right. We can't do that anymore. So they want you to take styling cues. They want, if you're doing an addition, or a hyphen, as they want you to do something that is appropriate to that existing building, something that is subservient to the building and not dominant to the building, and so they'll talk about all sorts of different things, but there's no gray area. So when Louis Cherry went and submitted his design and went through the whole process, they weren't using a personal judgment. They were using the rules and regulations that they had at their disposal. And you could see that it was a 3-2 decision. So, some people were like, "Yeah,
that was the after." I don't know if they mentioned what the.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was to revoke it.
Right.
But I mean, he went through.
Well, they
the
did
process.
Modify. They did have to go through modification. So
we have a link to the Google Maps, where you can basically walk through the neighborhood and take a look at all of the different houses that are in there, and you can use your own personal judgment on whether or not the house is in keeping with scale and size and this and that and the other. But I mean, it's not this blatantly offensive modernist home that is completely foreign in material and scale to any of the other houses that are there.
It's really simple. I think maybe what we had kind of mentioned was that it's probably the worst thing about it is just it's big flat wall presence right on the street.
Right.
The massing of the project is a little bit odd for the people walking by on the street.
When we first started talking about it, I mean, I took a little bit of an issue with the way that the scale of the house so close to the road is in comparison to some of the other houses that they've got their front porch to closer to the street, and so it brings that down to a more human scale rather than, a big blank wall like, Evan just said. And so, I mean, and everybody who will probably be following these links will have their own opinion of the house, good, bad, or indifferent. But, I think we're more, kind of taken aback on the actual efforts that it was that everybody else, based off of their own design sensibilities, was either, for or against this project, and in this particular case, shutting it down. But I did just link, post, so it'll be in the show notes, where they basically were approved to continue to complete the construction.
Yeah, it went before the court.
Give us the update.
So,
because I haven't read that one yet.
It was originally posted on September 11th, 2014, and updated on the 25th of September. Modern Oakwood home construction can continue, judge rules. So,
yeah, and if it's on newsobserver.com, and the judge determined the city's Board of Adjustment overstepped its authority when it yanked approvals for the modernist house. And the Board of Adjustment improperly reweighed the evidence and substituted its own judgment for that of the Raleigh Historic Development Commission, she wrote.
Yeah.
So construction is to resume, and it was already nearly complete. So there we go.
I think in some of the other articles, they were talking about that it was, nearing 85% when everything was, yanked on it.
Yeah.
I think that was the New York Times article?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It says that the neighbor is going to appeal.
Yeah, they have 30 days to appeal. So the story on this is not over yet. But I think what this raises is the question of, what about our neighborhoods? Because there's certainly districts like what you're talking about, Cormac, in Annapolis, and you more so probably on the East Coast, where you do have larger developments that took place over a relatively short period of time that have stayed relatively intact. And so to try and drop something into the center of Annapolis, might not be the most appropriate thing, but out here on the West Coast, a lot of our, developments aren't that old, in comparing them to stuff built on the East Coast. And so, our neighborhoods, I happen to live in an older neighborhood in Livermore here. And, there's homes from, say, the turn of the last century on up, and they're sprinkled with all the different styles. And what's really interesting about the neighborhood that I'm in is that there'll be styles from the teens in the 1920s up to the 40s, and then there's a lot of stuff from the 50s, and then there's even stuff from a little bit done in the 70s, and then right across the street from me is a development that was built on an old college site here in town that was all built in the 80s. So we have a mix of different styles, and the neighborhood has grown and just has this different mix of different styles. And so that's what makes it charming. That's what's most interesting about that. And so to take, this particular house that we're talking about here and say, it's not appropriate for this particular neighborhood. Now, I've never toured this neighborhood, and other than looking at the Google Street View, it's really hard to kind of get a good sense of the neighborhood. But there seems to be, some different styles, at least according to some of the articles written. There's been some more modern homes that have been built in this district before. And so it doesn't seem necessarily out of the ordinary here. So, and then, just as I was reading these articles, I was trying to think. The first thing that came to my mind is the Louvre in Paris, and thinking of the kind of the modern.
Well, there's so many examples of that kind of thing where it's been basically transplanted in there,
right
as a piece of modern architecture, which is contrasting to. Yeah, it's just so that nobody's confused, right?
Right. And in fact, the Secretary of Interior Standards even says if you're going to add on to an historic structure, now this is different from maybe a historical district here, but if you've got an historical building you're adding on to it, you can't actually match that existing style.
Exactly.
You have to be different. And so that you're not creating that false history.
Right. You, again, like I said, you take the, and I went through 6. Was it 6 or 8? It was an even number too, because it just seemed like it drug on forever. So let's just say 8. But 8 different board meetings, where we met with them, we reviewed it. Maybe 8's including with staff meetings and stuff like that. But at least 6 times where we sat in front of them, including the public hearings, where we went through, we talked about our design. They basically told us where within the design guidelines we were wrong and we needed to, review them and change them. But, basically, you go through all of these different points of what you're trying to do, and you say, okay, I'm, meeting, chapter 10.1.5 because we believe it's this instead of that. And they're like, well, no, I think you're reading it wrong. And that's why I'm saying is that there's so much care put into these, design guidelines for, historic districts and stuff that they don't just, and I don't know Raleigh's, their design guidelines like I know, the one that I was just recently involved with. So, but I know that there's so many things out there. And if they just follow the Department of Interior's, the Secretary of Interior's, like Neil was saying, if they just follow those guidelines, it's very cut and dry on exactly what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do to a historic building. And when you are doing a hyphen or an addition, you are very limited in what you can do and what you can't do, and mimicking the style is definitely something that they discourage because, it's not of the appropriate time. And that's why, you'll see multiple different old historic buildings that they're trying to restore back to, their original character. They'll actually pull off different, different editions because they weren't, because they were trying to mimic the style, but they weren't appropriate to the original.
Right.
So, here on the East Coast, with all of these, you were saying Annapolis is a pre-colonial, colonial development. And so historic downtown Annapolis, most of those buildings are, a couple hundred years old. And so it's more or less a time capsule. And so we've got a lot of the obviously we've got tons of that stuff around. And, if you're trying to do an accurate restoration, then they're going to pretty much strip it clean of all of these like little miscellaneous additions and stuff, and then go straight to the heart of it. And then if you want to do an addition, it's, again, as I say, of the time. I heard the words "of the time" so many times in my meetings with the historic district that I think it's just ingrained in my head that I know that if nothing else, you're not going to mimic the original design.
So, Cormac, in this one, how would you say on this house, is this house of the time in this Oakwood district, you think?
If I'm going to break down just the design character of this, versus doing, and again, this is all based on the Google Street View of walking around and looking at all of the different houses, both on this particular street, which just happens to be Euclid Street in Raleigh, North Carolina, if you guys want to walk by there. And then a couple of other streets, that run parallel and perpendicular to it. And I was looking at them, and they're all, of, the probably the 20s, where it was more of like the craftsman style houses. And, they're wood siding, they've got the front porch. Almost everything that all of these
the components of
everything, all of the components of the neighborhood are on this guy's house. Again, Evan and I were talking about the scale, and if you look at the way that he assembled this versus some of the other houses,
I think it's this combination of the scale and the setback, right? Because a lot of the other houses are pushed back. There's vegetation happening between the street.
Now hold on a second, guys.
And now this one's right there. But if you look right across the street, you have the same thing.
You have the same thing right across the street. I mean, this other house that happens to be the house of the person who's causing the most problems for them. Has an element. It's a single story element, but it does have a high gabled roof that is virtually the same distance away from the street as his house. Well, and it's not nearly the same scale, of course. And she does have a single story porch there, so that does help break down. It's much larger than the porch on the house across the street, but I mean, so it's not. I mean, but if you look down the street, there's a number of houses. They're all, they're porches and or single story elements that are all, pretty close to the street. This is actually a pretty tiny street. I mean, basically with the cars on each side, you're driving down the middle, and
it looks like an alley.
It does look like an alley. Yeah, it's a pretty small street.
To be quite honest with you, I think that there's nothing that his house is doing that. Again, it's purely a scale thing, but I mean, there's nothing element wise that his house is doing that any of the other houses are not doing. They're all doing the same thing. They all have the same elements. In fact, I think if you take this in a little bit more critical eye, I mean, his is actually contributing a little bit more because if you go down and you look at some of the houses, their garage doors and everything are practically right on the street. He's got a setback to his garage, so the car is not the front and center of the of the area. And I think he's doing things that are a lot better than some of the existing houses. And again, without going through the design guidelines or anything, I mean, I'm sure every bit of, the things that he was doing in this house met all of the criterias for that, and that's why they originally approved it.
And I think, one of the things you could argue is that, his house, again, going back to the mass, one of the things that is different about building today than it is in the previous decades is floor-to-floor heights are higher. Right.
Yep.
And it is 2 stories right on the street. But he didn't do a high-pitch roof. He did a low-pitch roof to bring it back down.
Exactly.
I'm sure that there are height limits in that area. So, I mean, I think that it's just a completely different way to solve the problem.
Right.
And I shouldn't say completely because it's not completely different. It's not like you don't see houses like this all the time. It just happens to be the newest thing. And so when it's right across the street from you, and the first thing you do when you look out your window every day, when you used to see an empty lot, right? And now you see this thing, that's where the real problem is coming from, I think. It's just that there's all of a sudden this new thing there that I have to look at every day.
Well, guys, how much do you think this is being driven? Now, certainly there are it's not just this one person living across the street, although she seems to be the leader
she's
against
a realtor
this
too, so I'm sure she has connections with people who can.
Well, but I mean, there's a neighborhood group that came up to help fight against this and such. That's mentioned in the articles.
There was a neighborhood group that was created to fight this.
Well, yes, that was created to fight this house. So I wanted to ask you guys. I mean, we've talked a little bit about historic preservation and some other things, but how much of this may come down to the fact that, first off, if if he wanted to move the house back, I'm sure he would have done so. Apparently, this lot is kind of long and narrow, and so he had to put it closer to the street than maybe he would have liked to. But how much of this might be just the fact that this person across the street, as you just said, Evan, is used to seeing that? Something we didn't mention until just a moment ago. This was an empty lot and had been, for as long as the person living across the street has owned this house, who built her house only about 6-7 years ago herself. So I don't know if hers was a remodel or a new house or not. It's not mentioned, but she's walking out her front door for 7 years since she built this house, and she sees this beautiful empty lot across the street. And now she has something that maybe architecturally she doesn't like. And on top of that, it's a house across the street. I don't like this house across the street, so I'm going to do everything I can to fight against this regardless of the style. I mean, do you guys think if he had built something like her house right across the street, if she would still have an issue?
That's a good question.
Well, her being, I think this is to me, it's just a battle of, design sensibilities. I mean, her being a realtor, she's probably...
It's opinion. Yeah.
It's pure opinion. I mean, she's, her being a realtor, she's trying to sell the neighborhood as this charming old Southern, neighborhood. And, she's trying, she's got probably her own little niche on exactly what she's trying to sell. And this now does not conform to her idealized neighborhood. I mean, to be quite honest with you, walking around this neighborhood, and if I want to interject my, design, my opinion, it's not nothing. It's not anything to write home about. I mean, it's an old neighborhood, and it looks old. It looks a little run down, and if nothing else, he's adding value by adding a new building, a new modern building, let's just not say modern, but a new building.
Contemporary, they keep calling it.
Well, I didn't want to just say modern, I'm just saying it is a new building.
Right.
And, so now you don't have a vacant lot. You actually have a home that's, contributing to the tax base there. And it should, newer homes or renovated homes and stuff should actually be bringing up the property value. So everybody should be, relishing the fact that there's, not a vacant lot or a dilapidated old house that, is condemned or whatever. And that, you're going to have a better tax, you're having, more taxes come in and all this other stuff. And it comes down to the argument of style, and, what's your style? Or, it goes back to how I get so annoyed with, is that art or is that art, or why do you call that art and not that kind of stuff? I mean, everybody has their own taste, and this may not conform to her taste, but it conformed to his taste. It conformed to that family's taste. That's what they wanted. It was within their, legal rights and the design guidelines and everything else for them to build that house, and they should have been able to build that house, which thankfully now they are.
But have you guys, I don't know if this happens where you are, but like if I go down to the beach down here near LA, like Laguna Beach or whatever, whenever there's somebody's doing an addition to their house or new construction, they have to put up like these temporary like furring strip houses. I don't know if you've seen these things, but it's just like this frame that kind of outlines like what an elevation would be. And there's like orange ribbons flying on it and stuff. And basically what it is it's showing you how much of your view this place is going to block.
Oh, wow.
And so I think, I'm just guessing. I don't know what this thing is called. I've tried to do a search for it before, and I've been unsuccessful in finding anything. But so, yeah, I mean, if you have a neighbor next door, they get to live with this temporary frame for some set amount of time next to them. And if it blocks their views, they get to complain about it. And so that what we're witnessing happening here in Oakwood doesn't happen, right? So they're going to say, yeah, this doesn't work for me. This is blocking my view straight out this window or whatever, I'm assuming. But that's why I think they do it, is so that it doesn't get to the point where it is 80% done. And then, all of a sudden there's all these lawyer and legal fees and, you got all of this financial investment that you're into the house with, plus the legal stuff on top of that. You have to go back to zero. I mean, talk about a terrible situation, right? So, have you guys, do they do that where you are at all?
Here in the Bay Area, yes. There are views of the Bay and views of the different hills and things around here. So, they will put, in fact, just in the neighboring town, there's a house where they did do, and in fact, there was no necessarily view here, but it was in more of an historic area of this town. And so they built essentially a box with the gable and just in 2x to show the neighborhood. This is essentially what this addition is going to look like. Yeah. And I know that was up for a little while. I don't know if there was a set time that it had to be up for and then take public comment. I'm sure there's something like that. But in other areas, it is common to put up these poles to show where the view is going to get blocked. Yeah. And so, so I have seen that before, and it is fairly common when you do have a view that could be impacted. And that's pretty sensitive, around the Bay Area, especially anywhere where you have views of the Bay or San Francisco and stuff like that from the East Bay out here. So those are critical and very important and certainly need to be addressed. I mean, that seems reasonable to me, that you can't just go build a big giant building in front of somebody else's view of San Francisco and say, it's my right, it's my property. So I think there are definitely rights for those surrounding neighbors for that. And in this case, this person was given the opportunity multiple times to make her case, and she lost each time. And, until she went further and somehow, ended up with the 3-2 vote on the review board. So, Mr. Cherry did everything he was supposed to do and was building the house. And, he's going to have to now live with a neighbor that's going to not be very nice to him, but, which could be unpleasant as well.
Yeah,
but
who's going to use the porch now? Jeez.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, hi, neighbor, probably not likely. She should be throwing... Nod. Yeah, she'll probably be throwing eggs at his house or something. But, but anyway, so I think, those types of things we do have around here in the Bay Area. So it can happen. It wasn't a part of this process because it didn't need to be, or that wasn't part of this at all. And he went through everything that he was supposed to. And, I think the house should stay where it is. But I'd like to take one last kind of look at this and kind of go up to the 30,000 foot level and get your guys' opinion on, how should, I think we've kind of gotten an idea tonight, but how should we address these historic neighborhoods and districts when it comes to architecture and new buildings or not necessarily additions to historic buildings, but let's take, this type of situation in, say, your neighborhood or, your area that you're working in or living in. How should we kind of handle these sorts of issues? Or are the current standards of how these things are handled through the Secretary of Interior standards or through your own local Historic Preservation Commission, is that enough?
I've been of two minds of the historic districts. One time I was, pro, then against, then pro, then against, and all this other stuff. But, the more and more I work with, historic buildings or, renovations and additions, and I've always been, sensitive to the fact that the one thing that we as Americans don't have a good value on is our own history. And so, we're always like mowing down historic districts or, historic neighborhoods and stuff to build a freeway or things like that. There was this absolutely beautiful neighborhood in downtown St. Petersburg, Florida, that it was called the Gaslight District. Well, they mowed it down so that they could build, kind of like the off-ramp interstate, from the interstate. And, so you don't get those character back, and now the city doesn't feel the same. It feels like it's missing something, and I really appreciate, almost every building, every era of building, some more than others, but I like the fact that we have historic districts in historic preservation societies put into place to protect our history. Sometimes they're a little overbearing and a little far-reaching because they think that they don't seem to have the grasp. I'll say going into the Annapolis Elementary School project, I was fearful because I'd never really worked with, a historic district at this kind of level where, here we are dealing with a pre-colonial war town that had all of this, air and history about it. And here I am going in, and I know that, most likely what I would like to do is a more modern edition. I'm like, how am I going to be able to deal with it? And learning the process, learning and dealing with and working with the commission and learning the process, reading over the guidelines, reading over the Department of Interior guidelines and stuff. It's really not that hard to work within the historic district to actually get something that is more contemporary or modern or something like that, that works with, I want to say works with harmony of, the district and all that other stuff. And I just think that, they're good if they themselves understand their role and responsibilities. When they become too overbearing and they think that, no, it has to be like this. It has to be a time capsule, and you can't do anything but, contribute to the time capsule feel of it, and nothing else, will work. That's when it gets a little out of control because Neil, you were talking about your neighborhood with all of these eclectic building styles and stuff. I think that's what actually is probably one of the best representations of, and I don't want to start, you guys can start humming the national anthem here, but some of the best representations of America is the eclectic collections of all of our buildings and styles and stuff like that, because it kind of shows this progress, it shows, people, different styles living together, and then, the progress of, throughout the year. So it's not a time capsule, it's a timeline. And that's what I think historic preservation should help contribute to, is not the time capsule, but the timeline.
I like that a lot. I think we should leave it there.
All right, but I'd like to hear what our listeners have to say.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's plenty of people out there that have had the, very similar experiences and, especially working residentially.
Well, and we have a lot of listeners in that area too.
Exactly.
So I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but it might. So yeah, tell us what you think. Tell us on Facebook page or comment on this episode. So you can either go to facebook.com/Archispeak podcast, or you can go to archispeakpodcast.com/episode/44 and leave a comment. And again, if you sign up for the show notes, you'll get links to all this stuff. One of the things we should note is that there's going to be a link to a Twitter parody account for Modern Oakwood, which is pretty funny. Yeah. And all the other stuff that we've talked about this episode. So make sure you sign up for that at archispeakpodcast.com, and you'll get the show notes delivered to your mailbox when the show goes live.
And also, don't forget what kind of prompted tonight's episode were the phone calls that we've received. And so if you've got comments and you'd like to leave them on this episode and do it as a voicemail, if we can use those, if we get your permission, let us know. Maybe we can intersect some of them on a future show. That number is 415-484-8496. So give us a call and let us know what you think.
All right.
All right, everyone. So don't forget to go to iTunes and leave those comments.
Go right now.
Go right now.
If you like the show.
That's right. Yeah, if you don't like the show, why are you still listening?
Yeah.
And with that, thank you very much. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
I died in South Africa, only outlined my body in Tiffany blue. When I died, I drove riding and swam with the dolphins and Lisa Frank and you. My Kim, the road was beautiful. Oh, we got it for days on end. Thank God I'm cut 'cause of my kind of luck. I'll be up on the block in front of all of my friends. This is what you get. This is what you get. This is the schedule. This is the set. It's unpredictable unless you forget. If you blow, you can bet.